So welcome everybody to Campaigns 101, Resources for Candidates. My name is Molly Uppenkamp. I'm part of the WIND leadership team here with a few other people who are also here on the WIND leadership team, as well as a few elected officials who have been so gracious to join us this evening to also share their expertise. So, hopefully I don't miss anyone here. Thanks to Josh Donati, our school committee, and Heather Springer and Emily Reynolds from our Commission of Trust Funds. Do we have other currently elected townwide people that I missed? Can't see all your names right now. That's okay. If I missed you, I'll try to come back to you later. I apologize. So anyways, thank you all of us who are here. Thank you so much for joining us. And as I mentioned, as people were coming in, the intention of this event here is for this to be really collaborative, supportive, relatively informal for all just to learn from each other and help kind of raise the level of campaigning comfort and skills throughout town as we enter this election season. So we please just ask that everybody enter this this conversation and this work with that supportive and collaborative spirit in mind. There are a couple of people on here who may be competitors for a particular board or office in town. And that's great. We love to see contested races, but just, we're all here to support and learn from each other. So let's go ahead and get started here with our game plan. So we are going to start with some suggestions on how you start the campaigning process. All of you who are running have already taken the first step of that and that you've chosen to run, and hopefully you have filed your paperwork to get on the ballot. So we'll look at first what's next, how you get started, how do you assemble your team, some good strategies for reaching out to voters, right? That's the most important part of a campaign, is that you get people to vote for you. How do you fundraise? That's more for the townwide office, but we'll get into that when we get there. How do you craft a personal statement and a bio, and where should that go? And then how do you kind of help keep the energy and the work surrounding your campaign going? So how do you generate publicity? What kind of events can you hold or be present at? And then what do you do on election day and afterwards? So that's the overview. And hopefully that'll work for everybody. I also am just getting a message that Chris Polito, Board of Assessors, is also here that I neglected to mention in my initial overview of elected officials. So my apologies, Chris, and thank you for joining.
Don't worry about it. Anything.
Yeah. All right. So first of all, a little bit about WIND. Women in Democracy Dedham is a nonpartisan effort committed to engaging more women in local politics and just educating the general public about local government. WIND supports voters and candidates by providing information and resources through our events and workshops like this one that you all made your way here to tonight. And we do not endorse individual candidates. All of our work and our efforts are equally accessible and available to anybody who's interested. And just you may be missing some typical or familiar WIND faces. In order to avoid any real or perceived conflicts of interest during election season, any WIND members who are running for townwide office or who are on a campaign committee recuse themselves from the WIND work for the duration of the election season. So you're left with kind of the bare bones of us that are left in this busy season. A lot of our WIND leadership team got snatched up by campaigns. All right, let's get started. And as we get into the meat of this, if you have questions as we go, there's anything that if unclear or things that pop into your head as we go, feel free to ask questions as we go through the general information. And then also know you'll have opportunities to ask questions in a smaller group setting, more focused on townwide campaigns or town meeting campaigns as we get a little bit later into the workshop.
Molly, can I add one more thing?
Yeah, absolutely, Jess, go ahead.
In addition to asking questions, feel free to chime in with ideas because, we're used to this being really informal, hanging out in the library and doing this, but many of you have campaign experience. And so if there's something that, is not on the slide or we don't say, you know, obviously questions are great, but also experiences and ideas are great too.
Absolutely. Thank you for mentioning that, Jess. Yes, we're all here to learn and share together and learn from each other. So absolutely. All right. So first bit, okay, you all, like I said, you all did the first step. You pulled your papers, you got your signatures, you turned it in. If you didn't do that, I'm sorry you've missed the deadline and you'll have to wait until next year. Hopefully that didn't just crush anybody's dreams. So hopefully you've gone through that step. So now what do you do next, right? How do you then go from a name on a ballot to someone who's ready to engage in and work on the campaign? For town meeting, you don't really need much of a team. It's something you can probably handle mostly yourself, and we'll get into more town meeting specific stuff in a little bit. But for those of you who are, taking that bigger leap into seeking a townwide office, you're going to want to have a team of people around you to support your work. The most important person you want to find is your campaign manager. That's going to be your go-to person, kind of coordinating volunteers, managing events, is going to be the public face of your campaign in a lot of ways. So you want to find that person who could be your go-to, who can handle a lot of the things that you as a candidate may not have time to handle. And I think we have a couple of campaign managers on the call tonight, which is great too. Other important roles, you want to have a treasurer, right? Especially a lot of these races are quite contested. You're going to need to raise and spend some money. And you want to make sure you're keeping track of all that money appropriately, and that's the treasurer's job. So the treasurer is going to open and manage a bank account with you, is going to handle in taking donations, and is going to worry about filing the campaign finance reports that are required by Massachusetts state law. So there are 2 fundraising reports that townwide campaigns will need to file, one 8 days prior to the election, one 30 days after. And your treasurer is going to be the one who is primarily responsible for taking care of that. If you're going to be managing a lot of people, it's nice to have a volunteer coordinator who can kind of lighten the load a little bit from the campaign manager. So it's not just one person communicating with what might potentially be a large group of people. And others as needed, right? People to show up when you have a sign hold, to help you with, sticking stamps on mailers, all that kind of stuff. This is the time to ask your friends for favors. So, be thinking of who can fill in these roles as you go. I feel like I just covered a lot there. There's a lot in those roles. Do people have questions about these specific campaign roles, or people who have filled any of these roles in prior campaigns have anything to add before we move on to the next? Josh, I'm seeing your hand. Go for it. You can feel free to unmute yourselves if you have something to jump in. That's totally fine.
I was just going to say, with the treasurer piece, I think some people, when they hear treasurer, they think it has to be someone with like this immense financial background, and that's just not the case. So that shouldn't be something that's super intimidating to anybody. If you don't currently have a treasurer, don't feel like you need to find like a CPA. Chris is actually running anyway, so that he wouldn't be available.
I was just going to say, what are you hating on the CPAs, Josh? Come on, man.
No. Quite jealous, as a matter of fact.
That's literally why I'm sitting here still working in my office at 8 o'clock at night, 8:50.
There you go.
7:50.
So yeah, just thinking about that position in particular sticks out to me as something that the name sounds very intimidating, but the actual work involved is not so much. So just want to mention that.
Yeah. Awesome, Josh. Thank you. Yeah, and the people that I know who have been treasurers on campaigns are not necessarily finance people by any stretch of the imagination, and have done so quite successfully. So
yeah, and Molly, it's Peter. I've been treasurer a lot for many campaigns. So if anyone has any questions whatsoever, feel free to reach out to me if you'd like.
All right, you heard it here first. Campaign treasurers, Peter Springer is your go-to guy. Awesome. And we're happy to provide you with Peter's contact information if you need it. Just let us know. All right, awesome. Okay, so you got your team together. Now you got to figure out, all right, what are you going to do to get people to actually show up and vote for you on April 10th? You've got to reach out to voters. right? That's the thing you got to do. You got to reach as many people as possible, and and be able to connect with and get them to show up and vote for you. So, think about who you want to spend some time with in figuring out how to do that. And also kind of who your kind of target demographic are, right? So ask people who have done it before. You've come to this workshop, so you're going to get some of that expertise, but also reach out to people who are currently on the board that you're running for, people who have done that job before, right? What was their strategy? What is their advice? What is their expertise? Other influential town leaders, people who have been around for a long time, reach out to as many people as you can, gather their expertise. Town meeting members is a great resource for kind of getting to know each neighborhood. Town meeting members are those representatives who have a little bit more of that kind of direct connection to each part of town. They'll know a little bit more what kind of messaging might resonate. And just, again, now's the time to talk to every friend you have ever made in Dedham, right? Who are your neighbors? Who have you, one time went to an event with? Who did you randomly become Facebook friends with after having a short conversation, right? Reach out to every single one of those people you already know and make sure they know why you're running, what your plans are, and are, on board with kind of supporting you, hopefully, but also just kind of understand your message and how they can be a part of helping you out if you need it. So first step, talk to everyone you know, try to get them to vote for you. Okay. But probably, unless, some of you have literally thousands of friends, just your friends is probably not going to be enough to win an election. So you've got to find some other people that you can reach out to as well. And the town clerk, Paul Munchback, who you all interacted with, him or his office in some way when you pulled your papers, is a huge help with things like this. That the town clerk's office maintains a record of all of the registered voters in town. And they can provide you with some data on who of those registered voters actually have voted in recent elections. You can sort it and break it down by precinct. Can provide you with, age demographics of some of that, like things that are publicly available in voter registration records. The town clerk has that information. So you want to make sure you get that list of who the potential votes are out there in town, and then, start making some decisions on who your people are, right? Like, who are you going to spend the most time, energy, and, eventually money targeting your message to? Do you want to just talk to you and focus your efforts on the people who always vote in town elections? Do you want to try to bring, new voters out to town elections, the more irregular voters who maybe you have some sort of personal connection with, right? So that's a good conversation for your team kind of at this early stage of the campaign, is kind of what's going to be your strategy. And that's especially helpful for townwide elections or townwide positions, but town meeting, that can be a helpful conversation as well, right? You're probably not going to knock on every single door in your precinct. So, how do you want to spend your time and energy, especially if you're a town meeting candidate? You're probably doing a lot of this by yourself. So how do you want to spend your personal time and energy targeting voters and getting people to show up for you? So making some of those decisions early on is a really good idea.
Molly?
Yeah, go ahead, Jess.
Yeah, so I think the first campaign I helped with was probably like 8 years ago. And when I did, I think it was either library or school committee candidate. And I was very new to how the townwide campaigns worked. And so I kept hearing about this super voter list. And so for people who've heard of this like magic unicorn super voter list, I just thought I'd kind of demystify what that is. So basically, what people have done over the years is tracked and looked at the people who show up every year for a town election. So we have around, let's say, 18,000 registered voters in town. There's really only 3,000 or so who show up year after year after year. And so that's when people talk about a super voter, that's what they're talking about, are those people who come every single year. And that's the kind of thing, if you tell Paul Munchback, the clerk, the kind of data you want, it's very easy to assemble that data yourself. And so for a long time, I think it was, it kind of was, it seemed like it was hard to get involved because nobody knew what the super voter list is, but that's basically what it is just getting a list of the registered voters, figuring out who's voted in town elections. And then I would suggest looking beyond that to see, other people who've made it to the polls, because oftentimes you really want to expand that pie. And in general, my personal opinion, and I think the opinion that our organization has always held, is that the more people are out there voting, the better. We want as many people to be, involved in helping make decisions in town as possible. So, so wherever you can kind of think about how to expand that, what it is to be a super voter, the better.
Absolutely, and especially we're just coming off of a general election where voter turnout in Dedham was really, really high. In November for the presidential election. Most of those people who voted in November probably won't vote on April 10th unless you reach out to them and tell them that they should. So, think about how to expand that and bring those people in. All right. So, I think reaching out to people you don't know is something that can be intimidating. So we turn to people who have done this over and over again. To ask what some of their advice was. So those of you who don't know Dan Driscoll, he's the town meeting moderator and has done that job for a long time and run successfully for it on several occasions. So, his advice, it can be challenging, but knocking on doors is key for any of the higher visibility races. Start with an area where you know people to get your rhythm and confidence up, and then go where you are not well known. Some people will reward your effort with a vote. Right? Just the fact that they see you're out there. And especially that, I think, for higher visibility races, but also for town meeting, right? If you go out and just say, hey, I'm doing this, here's who I am, that might be enough to get some people to vote for you. You have to be in campaign mode throughout the campaign, have your literature in the car in case you meet someone, take down names of people you come across during the day and follow up with a low-key email. Every interaction in town between now and April 10th is a chance to win a vote. So think of them as such. But be ready for some rejection. If you stop someone on the street, ask for directions, they would most often take the time to help you. Once you say, hi, I am blank and I'm running for blank, you run the risk of being treated somewhat brusquely. It's not personal. Some people just don't want to talk to you about that when they're out running their errands, and just move on and find the next person. And expertise from someone here in the meeting, Emily Reynolds, Commissioner of Trust Funds. When you're talking to people on the campaign trail, collecting signatures, whenever you're out and about, don't do all the talking. So Emily, I feel weird reading your words to you. Are you cool with that?
That's totally fine. Go ahead. I'm happy to elaborate or, summarize.
Okay. Perfect. So Emily says, at first I was so eager to try to sound legit and smart. And then I realized I was saying too much. Let others share some of the things about themselves. If you're meeting someone new, ask them how long they've been in town, how the town has changed, and where they think improvements can be made. Even if those ideas aren't at all related to the position you're running for, I found that people just like to be heard and reassured that you want to make a positive contribution to the town. Right. So just as much about listening as it is about talking whenever you're out on the campaign trail.
Molly.
Yes.
Hi, it's Lisa Farnham. Any, I guess, unique suggestions or ideas in a time of COVID? So I don't think going door to door is really probably a cool, oh, see, I didn't even know that was coming. Thank you.
Yeah. Awesome question, Lisa. And, this in a lot of ways is the first COVID campaign. Last year ended up being, but didn't start that way. So like last year was all very weird. So, we don't necessarily have great expertise of people who have done it before in this environment, but this is just kind of some of our best ideas of how to handle it. And yeah, be extra cautious with your COVID safety, right? During a campaign, it's not the time to push the envelope and break the rules. You don't want to get sick. You don't want someone to get sick at one of your events. Like that in general is very bad, right? We don't want people getting sick, but it also would be really damaging to your campaign. So, be extra cautious about that safety protocols. And kind of keep COVID in mind in all of your conversations and how you're planning things. Publicize to your supporters that absentee voting is available, right? Don't let people be deterred from showing up to vote for you if they're nervous to vote in person. There is absentee voting available. The form to request an absentee ballot is already up on the town clerk's website. And there will likely be kind of early absentee voting rolling out in the couple of weeks before the election. So, make sure people know that too.
Yeah, I did talk to the clerk today, and the absentee voting is just going to be by mail. So there won't be any, you can't do it at the counter as in the past, but you can fill the form out as soon as you want.
Yeah. Yeah. So, and it might be useful to have a couple of those forms kind of on you when you're out and about around town. And if you talk to people and they're feeling nervous about voting in person, encourage them to request that absentee ballot. And now's the time to get really creative about how you can gather with people when you can't really gather with people. So think of outdoor spaces where you can chat with neighbors at a distance, right? I think I've already seen a couple of campaigns having like playground and sledding meetups. Outdoors is obviously so much safer than indoors. So anytime you can think of a way to do an outdoor gathering and make sure you remind people to wear masks and practice social distancing when they're there, that can be great. If you decide to knock on doors, and Lisa, you're right, I think that that's certainly kind of a gray area, but think about how you can maybe do so safely, right? Obviously always wear a mask, but if you decide to knock on a door, before they answer, maybe back up a considerable distance so you're offering, a really, big buffer between you and the person that you're talking to. Be ready for them to not want to interact with you because they're worried, and don't take that personally. Think about ways that you can do that. Or try to do some sort of virtual version of door knocking, right? Social media can be really great to facilitate some sort of meet and greet. Most of the neighborhoods and precincts have Facebook pages. See if you can kind of, offer some sort of, virtual hello through some of those forums. And just be as creative as you can. You probably won't reach quite as many people as you could in a normal campaign year, or at least not in the same ways, but there are some probably good ideas out there. And if anybody else who's working on campaigns has any of those kind of special COVID tips to share, please feel free to jump in. Like I said, this is kind of the first time through a COVID campaign for all of us. So.
One idea I saw that that I think could be modified in some way is that if you wanted to do the door-to-door knocking, like if you figured out the neighborhood you were going to in advance, you could send a postcard or make phone calls in that neighborhood, or find someone who lives in the neighborhood to reach out to the neighbors and kind of just say like, hey, I'm going to be walking around your neighborhood on Sunday between 1 and 3. And if you'd like to, if you're willing to say hi, like I'll knock on your door or we can set up a time or whatever. So there's kind of like a way to signal to people that you're going out into neighborhoods. Whether or not they take you up on it, I don't know, but I had seen that as some creative campaigning from other communities. So I just thought it was worth mentioning.
Or, if there's someone on your team who lives in a particular neighborhood, maybe they'd be willing to kind of host you in their front yard or something like that for a period of time and get out the word to their neighbors that, you'll be there and willing to talk and answer questions. And, people can walk by and come to you perhaps too, if you have those kinds of connections. So yeah, creativity is the name of the game. I feel like in a COVID campaign, there's no idea that's too weird if it's going to get you in conversation with voters.
Yeah, and I would just add too that the kinds of like the way that you are creative about this signals how you are as a leader. And so, I think I would just be thoughtful about that, right? Like if you're someone, and I think you can communicate that to people, right? Like it's really important to me that I meet with people. And so that's why I'm going to be at this park, or whatever. And so I think, if you're running a Parks and Rec campaign, I'd be doing that at the parks, right? If you're running a school committee campaign, maybe you're meeting at school playgrounds. Like I think there's different ways to make sure that you're, what your events are and strategies are also communicating something about your values.
Absolutely. All right, and maybe this kind of keep this as a topic in the back of your brains for when we get out to into breakout rooms, and you can all kind of, we can help each other brainstorm some good ways to do this in a COVID environment. But that being said, you know, as all the time, phone calls to people is a really important way to reach voters, and especially now when you're going to have fewer in-person interactions with people. So be ready to make some calls. If you're running a townwide campaign, you know, have volunteers who are ready to make some calls on your behalf. And make sure you're making good use of that time on the phone, right? No one wants to spend an extended period of time having a conversation with a random candidate. So, you know, when you're in that phone call, what are the things that you want to ask for? You know, depending on who you're calling, if they're people you have some sort of connection to, you can ask if they would donate some money, right? It's awkward asking for money. It's uncomfortable. Nobody likes it. But if you're running for office, it's necessary. Like, you need to have some money. You can't finance this all yourself, for, you know, logistical and I believe also some legal reasons. So, you know, you want to make those fundraising requests. Ask if people are willing to help you out in some way, right? Are they willing to put one of your lawn signs in front of their house? You know, do they want to work on your campaign? Are they going to show up to a sign hold maybe? You know, so think about, you know, asking people who seem interested in your candidacy. Always ask them for their vote, but if they seem into it, ask them for more than that. And you know, the worst that happens is they say no, and then you're exactly where you started with those asks. And be strategic. You don't want to repeat call people asking for the same thing. You want to keep track of who you've talked to and what they've kind of committed to or been willing to share with you. So, you know, did they already say, yeah, I'm willing to volunteer? Then maybe your follow-up call with them is about specific volunteer events. You know, if they said they wanted to donate, but then they haven't yet, you can maybe then know you need to follow up with them to donate. But keep track of all that data. And you know, Google is amazing for this because you can have a shared spreadsheet that your whole team can have access to, and anytime anyone's making phone calls can input that information, so you all know, you know, what each person has committed to, and if you need to reach out to anybody else.
I would just say on that too, like when you're making calls or knocking on doors, whatever your biggest ask is. So if you're like, if you're trying to make fundraising calls or trying to make, you know, volunteer calls specifically, like whatever your biggest ask is besides voting, start with that, and then like trickle down to the, like, you know, if it's like, will you volunteer? And they're like, oh no, I don't really have the time. Hey, no problem. You know, could you donate some money? If they're like, oh, I really can't, I can't afford that. No problem. How about, can I drop off a lawn sign and you can show your support in your lawn? Like, you know, just start with the biggest ask and hopefully they say yes. If not, you can tear down.
Great advice, Lori.
Yeah,
Thank
good
you.
point. And then I would just add on that level of support, you want to kind of track how strong a supporter they are, because that's going to help you at the end of the campaign with your get out to vote, right? You want to, on, you know, election day or the couple days prior to election day, you don't want to spend time calling people who were lukewarm about you, right? Or even don't support you, right? You want to spend all your focus on the people who you know really support you and are going to show up. So that just helps you triage your time later.
Yeah, I've made calls for campaigns before where you kind of like rate somebody, you know, on a scale of 1 to 5 of how like strongly they supported you. And you know, when you get to the end of the campaign, you want to make sure everybody who supports you 5 is there and showing up and is going to vote. So keeping track of that data is really important. All right. And town meeting people, I know that a lot of this stuff we're sharing right now is kind of most relevant to townwide campaigns, but we don't have too much more of that. And I promise town meeting, you're going to get your glory day when we get into the breakout rooms. So don't worry. Because next we're going to talk about fundraising, which before we get into this, town meeting, you really don't need to fundraise at all. Town meeting is not part of the you know, required finance reporting by state election law. So, you know, you aren't required to file financial reports of any kind. You don't really need to do a lot of expensive campaigning for town meeting. So, you know, don't be stressed about this if you are running for town meeting. But if you're running for townwide office and if that race is contested, you're going to need to raise some money to be able to win. So establish a budget and a goal for your fundraising. And how much that is going to kind of depend a little bit on what race you're running, how many other people are running, how much kind of outreach you're going to need to do to be successful. The past year's campaign finance reports, the required paperwork are available on the town website. So if you have absolutely no idea if you want to be, do I spend $1,000? Do I spend $20,000? Like if you have just no idea where to start, look at the reports of campaigns that have done it before and see how much they spent. And that can be a good kind of starting point to be like, okay, I'm way off. I'm right on the money, give you a ballpark. And again, that's where kind of reaching out to people who are currently on the board you're serving or seeking, currently serving on the board you're running for, or have done it before can also be helpful in giving you that kind of guidance. You can, and then, once you have a goal, you got to actually raise the money, right? So you want to have some sort of campaign kickoff event. Obviously, in COVID times, that's virtual. And I know a couple of candidates have already started doing that. So that's a great opportunity to introduce yourself and make that first ask for money from people who are interested in your campaign. Reach out to people who to host house parties with their friends. See, okay, you got your friend to donate. Now, will your friends' friends donate? And try to do that. Again, have outdoor meetups. Anytime you can connect with people, always have it in the back of your mind that maybe they'll give you a little bit of money. And probably most donors are not going to give you hundreds of dollars at a time, right? But if you have a lot of people donating 10, 15, 20 bucks, that's going to add up and be helpful in the long run. And probably, because you're not going to be having a ton of in-person events, you want to try to figure out a way to collect this money digitally online if possible. Asking everybody who wants to donate to your campaign to put a check in the mail is going to probably be a hurdle that some potential donors won't want to jump over. So, think about PayPal, Square, ActBlue, online platforms for collecting that money. Think about what's going to suit your needs. That's obviously a conversation you want to have with your treasurer, and be able to collect that money that way. All right. And again, when we get into the breakout rooms, those of you running for townwide office, if you have a lot of fundraising questions, there will be a former campaign treasurer in your midst who can help with some of those questions as well. All right. So you've got your team, you've figured out how to start reaching out to voters, you're collecting money. Now, what do you say to these people, right? Like, what's your message? How do you convince these people that you're the right person for the job? So you want to make sure you have a kind of a pre-planned, rehearsed statement off the top of your head that you can answer, why are you running for blank, that you can answer that effectively in any situation. So writing that personal statement and having it kind of internalizing it for the duration of your campaign is really important. And there are a few specific places and times when you're going to be able to get a personal statement out to the community. You want to make sure it includes a brief statement of your purpose and mission, right? What are you hoping to accomplish through this campaign? And if you are elected to your position, what do you most believe in? What are your priorities? What experience do you have that qualifies you? And a little bit about who you are, right? People like to vote for people that they feel like they know, right? That old kind of campaign cliche of people vote for who they feel like they can have a beer with, right? It may be cliche, but in a lot of ways it's true. So try to, introduce yourself to people in a way that's going to make them comfortable with you. And once you have that personal statement, in addition to using it as the basis of your communication with people when you interact with them, also the Dedham Times and the Dedham Transcript ahead of the election will specifically print candidate statements for townwide office and have that available. Also, Wind is hosting candidate statements for townwide office and for town meeting on our website this year. We launched this last year. People really gave us good feedback about it, that they liked that there was an opportunity to get to know the candidates ahead of going out to vote. So we encourage everybody to take a few minutes, and once you have that messaging kind of clear, submit that statement so that voters who are looking to find out about you can find out about you from the WIND website, in addition to the newspapers. And I believe Jess just put the links to those forms in the chat. So, all right, excellent. We just have a couple of more things to quickly go through before we get into some breakout rooms. All right, so advice on messaging. I'm not going to read this whole quote to you this time. I feel like I want to get into the more conversational part, but you know, take some time to really think about what your top priorities are and center your messaging around that, right? You don't want to bombard people with 100 things that you're going to try to do. Come up with the few things that are the most important, and use that as kind of the core of your biography as you're out campaigning. And then in addition to communicating that messaging to the public through the WIND website and in the newspapers, you also want to get it out in other ways as well, through mailings, postcards, flyers, letters, etc. Lawn signs, that just is going to help you build that name recognition that is going to make people recognize who you are when they get into the voting booth. The standard or the norm in town is that you can place the signs 1 month before election day. So March 10th, target that date, 1 month before the election to get out and have your volunteers put signs in people's yards. Having sign holds, again, that's an outdoor campaigning activity that can be quite a bit safer than indoor ones. Just identify some high traffic areas and have people out there holding your sign and building that name recognition. In addition to the published candidate statements, you can consider taking out ads in the Dedham Times, the Transcript, or other papers. Consider having people endorse you, writing letters to the editor in support of your campaign, and definitely using social media, which is always a useful tool, but again, I think especially this year because of COVID restrictions.
Molly, oops, sorry.
Yeah, go for it, Lisa.
Do you and I'll stop asking questions now after this.
Don't stop.
So for sign holds, do you have to tell the police or tell anybody if you're at like a major intersection, and I don't know, not that you're going to be causing traffic jams, but do you have to tell anybody other than the people that are helping you to hold signs?
I don't believe you're required to at all. If you anticipate for some reason that it's going to cause some sort of congestion or spectacle, I suppose just a quick heads up to the chief of police, like, hey, we're going to be standing on this corner from this time to this time, like, couldn't hurt. But you're just hanging out on a sidewalk or on the side of the road in a public space, so there's no real rules about that.
So you don't know though if other candidates are going to be there, so it could be a pile of people.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah. And especially, usually I would say, most major intersections have 4 corners, so just kind of, each candidate take one, but we have some races this year that have significantly more than 4 candidates who wouldn't all fit at an intersection at the same time. So yeah, that's true. And the closer we get to election season, some of those kind of the money intersections, right, at Dedham Square, or like at the Rotary, or by the Fairbanks House, like there's going to be likely more than one campaign targeting those. So that might be part of your strategy, right? When can you get a lot of people to see you that maybe wouldn't be that kind of crowded time when you're competing for their attention as they're driving by? So that's certainly something to think about. And you're probably going to have to spread out quite a bit more than we otherwise would on sign holds, and maybe not have as many people show up to each one, so that you have some space for that distancing. You don't want people driving by and being like, oh my gosh, there's Lisa's campaign, and they're all huddled together like
no masks.
They don't care about COVID, right? You don't want to give that impression.
Right.
So.
Thank you.
Yeah.
For folks that have run campaigns in the past with multiple candidates, have they coordinated sign holds? Have they reached out? I'm just wondering, from those who have the experience running campaigns, if they've coordinated sign holds with other campaigns.
That's a good question that I don't necessarily know the answer to. Former campaign
Yeah.
managers and candidates.
Yeah, this is Peter Springer. I mean, it's really up to the candidate themselves and how they feel about, so for me, when I've been on different campaigns, it's kind of what the candidates want. So if they want to combine sign holds, we do it. If they don't, we don't. So there's really no set
But do you
answer.
find out, like, when your competitors are gonna be there and then you say, oh, we're not gonna be there then? Like, what, oh, she's gonna be at Endicott Circle, so we gotta go to Whiting Ave, right? Sometimes that happens.
It would
Right.
be nice if we could, so like, I'll give you an example, soccer practices. We actually sort of have all the fields listed and then try to get the coaches to tell us most of the time, obviously things change, but when they think they're gonna practice, so we don't have 7 teams all on the same field.
Mhm.
So yeah, I mean, it would be nice if candidates did kind of try to coordinate.
Yeah, that's a great idea. And I think that also kind of, speaks to the moment, and that, they're, in addition to just the, the political angle of, wanting to make sure people actually see your signs. There's also the COVID safety. So I think, if you're a candidate for townwide office, trying to initiate that conversation with the other people that are running could be an interesting entry point into having the kind of the campaigning conversation with your opponents. So that's a really great idea. All right. Now, sign holds are great. They don't necessarily, there's not a ton of research that says they change a lot of people's minds, might make more people remember your name. But phone calls and, more direct or targeted messaging is going to be a little bit more effective at actually persuading people to vote for you than sign hold. So if you're strapped for cash and time and you're trying to decide, do I do another mailing or do I order more signs for a sign hold? Do the mailing, right? That's gonna be more effective at convincing voters to vote for you. And don't bombard. People don't want to read a novel about you and your life when something comes in the mail, right? They want to know who you are, what you're about, and why you would be good. So keep it short and sweet, and always include a photo. It may feel kind of awkward to have a glamour shot taken of you or whatever, but including that photo, there's probably people who know you and like you that don't know your name, right? If you've been out around town, and once they see your face, they'll be like, oh, that's who that is. I had a really nice conversation with them at such and such. And we'll prompt them to vote for you. So always include a picture, and include a way that they can reach out to you to find out more information or to follow up with you if you have questions. So an email address, a Facebook page, some sort of kind of follow-up option, include that there as well. And when you're thinking about mailers and who to mail them to, one other way to tap into your network is to ask your friends and supporters to send dear friend cards, right? Give your supporter a stack of cards and have them mail them to whoever they know, and whoever their friends are in town, and sign it. I'm supporting so and so because please join me in doing that. And that kind of personal connection can also be really helpful. And speaking of mailers, we did compile a whole bunch of examples of some different postcards, letters, and other campaign things that went in the mail. So I just put a link to a PDF that I think has like 16 or 17 different types of mailers on it. So again, I want to get us to the breakout rooms here pretty soon. So I'm just going to quickly give you a couple of flavors of what's in there. So here's a Virginia's town meeting postcard. Here is Demetria Sullivan ran for select board a couple of years ago. So here's an example of something that I think was a bit larger, right? Virginia's was kind of your typical 4x6. This was a little bit larger. You can also, you don't have to necessarily order something, special size from the printer. You can fold things up and address and stamp something on the back and have all your info in the middle. So, there's lots of different ways you can get creative with your mailing. And, again, time to tap into your graphic designer friend to try to make yours stand out and make it look nice. So again, there's a whole bunch of examples on that document that I just put the link to. So hopefully that's helpful in giving you some ideas. All right. Okay, couple of last things, and then you don't have to listen to me talk anymore. So events, right? Usually campaign season, the advice would be get out and about and be at every single event that is being held by any organization in town. There aren't really going to be any of those because of COVID. So think about other ways that you can get your voice out there and other types of events that you can show up to. WIND and the Dedham Junior Women's Club are just in the very beginning stages of planning our campaign for or a candidate forum like we held last year. So be on the lookout for more information about that. Dedham TV does a Conversations with the Candidates series. So if you're running for townwide office, they'll be contacting you about that once they get those plans underway. And typically in past years, the Council on Aging, the Newbridge on the Charles have had candidate events. I don't believe they've announced plans yet of if they intend to have those events this year in a virtual format. But looking out for that is, there might be some of those kinds of events happening around town as well. So, again, just kind of keep your ears open, and anytime you hear of there's something happening, if you can show up and have a conversation with a person, that's probably one more vote that you wouldn't have otherwise had. So think about that. All right. And then finally, you've done all this work. It's finally April 10th. It's election day. It's going to be a busy day for you, right? You want to be out and about all day, waving to people as they come into the polls, supporting your volunteers who are hopefully outside of every polling location holding your sign. If you're a town meeting candidate, you yourself should be out there holding your sign that says, hey, this is me, I'm running for town meeting, right? People going in to vote for town meeting often don't know the names of 13 people that are on that list, but they will know yours if you're there with a sign when they're walking in. So spending that time doing that and being out there and being visible goes a long way. I would say especially if the weather's bad. For the first, my first interaction with Dan Driscoll, knowing who I was my first time running for town meeting. I was standing outside in like this like windy, rainy, cold election day with like a homemade poster board that said like Molly up in Camp Precinct 3 town meeting. And like a year later, I finally had like my first real conversation with Dan. He's like, I remember you were out there in the cold. So, those kinds of quick moments can really make an impression on people and can convince them to vote for you. So, be out there and be as visible as possible on election day, no matter how big or small the office is that you're running for. And that evening, you want to use that as an opportunity to thank the people who have helped you. So arrange some sort of fun, like online gathering where you can be surrounded by friends when the results come in. And, whatever the results are, it's good to, be around the people who helped you get that far and who will support you as you find out the results. And then finally, election day happens. And you want to then kind of close out your campaign in pretty short order after that. So pick up your lawn signs as soon as possible the next day, if you can, within the next couple of days. Get them all picked up. Write a letter to the Dedham Times thanking everybody who volunteered on your campaign and who voted and supported for you. Again, no matter the result, you want to make sure you thank people who had your back. And then, make sure you and your treasurer have everything that you need to file that final fundraising report for 30 days after. And through all of it, it can be long. Sometimes it can be stressful. It's going to be a busy time, but stay positive, right? You're putting yourself out there, which is great. And throughout this whole campaign, you're representing Dedham. Hold yourself to a higher standard. Really stay focused on why you decided to run, the reasons that you want to help our town. And, voters will appreciate that earnestness and that positive attitude throughout the campaign. So that's all I have for our little presentation. I talked for way longer than I thought I would. I hope that wasn't terribly boring for everybody. That was a lot of information. So, all right. And I think probably at this point, the best use of time is going to be to give you an opportunity to get into a little bit smaller group and have some more targeted conversations about your specific campaign strategies and needs, depending on what you're running for. So we have some breakout rooms for one set up for the townwide office and one for the town meeting. So if you go to the breakout rooms button, you should be able to select and join the breakout room that is relevant to you. Jessica from our planning board and Meg, former treasurer, are going to work with the townwide campaigns, and then Jean Zeiler and myself are going to work with the town meeting people. So why don't we say maybe 15 minutes, 20 minutes?
Let's say 15, and we can always message if you want to
Okay,
keep going.
so yeah, let's target to come back together in 15 minutes. Sounds good.
Right.
Sorry, Chris, got cut off.
No worries. It just depending on how much somebody does donate to you, there are different reporting requirements. I think it's somebody donates under 50, you don't have to give it. If it's over 50, their name has to be there. If it's over, I think it's over 250.
200.
I think it's 200 that you need to have
200 is like the occupation. So there are, reporting requirements that need to go with that. So that's why you see, when you see a lot like the bigger campaigns, like the Norfolk County Commissioner race, a lot of them use a professional treasurer because there's so much reporting requirement that go into that. They'll go to somebody that they just pay for somebody to do that like that. So.
All right, awesome. Well, it seems like just from the tail end of that, it sounds like the townwide room had some great conversations, some great tips. We had a great time in the town meeting room. So just to quickly close out, again, we're just thank you all for throwing your hat in the ring and for running. It takes a little bit of guts to take that leap, and you all have done that, and our town will be better for it. So thank you for putting yourself out there and stepping up to run. And as you get to campaigning, continue to reach out to the people you met here, and we're happy to continue to be resources. And don't forget to submit your profile for the WIND website so that as many people as possible can find out who you are and why you're running. And what we have a dedeadline for that, Jess, and I don't remember what it is.
I think it's March 10th, and we just would also ask you, since we see you all personally, if you know other people who are running, whether it's town meeting or townwide office, if you could let them know about that and share that link, it would really be helpful. We will be the same thing we did last year, which is we didn't want to just rely on emails or social media, so we actually will be sending postcards to all the candidates. But particularly with the post office delays and stuff, just a little bit nervous. So the more that we can get people to find out about that without having to wait for a postcard, I think the better it will be for the community.
Absolutely. All right. Well, I think that winds us down. So a little bit longer than I promised at the beginning, but not quite as long as the Facebook event promised. So we'll call that a win for our evening. So again, thank you all. And I hope that this was useful, and good luck in your campaigns.
Good luck, everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Nice
Thanks
job.
for running, all of you.
All right. No, I'm not running.
Thanks.
I'm running out of here.
Thank you for not running, Peter.
Running out of here.
Thank you, guys.
Thank
All right.
you.
Thanks.